Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Fortress with Sherry Peel Jackson. Today, we have my longtime guest and friend, educator, Dr. Natalie Taylor Shaw. Natalie is a STEM instructor, that is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Specifically, she thrives in the world of science with a BA in biology, a master's in science education, and a PhD in education. Now, Natalie has developed courses and strategic learning plans for students and their parents to ensure continuing education during the pandemic and create harmony in the household. You know what's been happening, and everybody's been on that stay-at-home order. With her years of analysis of student learning styles and her life coaching certifications, she's created a unique system that gives both the parents and the students some peace of mind and assurance that the children won't be behind when school starts again, whenever that's going to be. Welcome, Natalie.
Hey there, Sherry.
So, Natalie, start off by telling us how your particular school system reacted when the school shut down and the shelter at home started in March.
Well, my school system didn't seem too prepared for it. I think that they thought that we were going to be out of school maybe 2 weeks, and we were out of school 8 weeks. And so initially the school system didn't have a strategic plan, and it seemed really disorganized and frustrating for most.
Wow. What about the students? How did they react once once the school system started putting something together?
Well, initially the students were compliant, and they just wanted to know how they were going to get their lessons. And they too thought it would only be 2 weeks, so they were going to hunker down and comply. And things quickly changed.
Wow. And I know you probably have to communicate regular anyway with the parents, but through email, how were the parents reacting?
The parents, when they thought it was just 2 weeks, they were fine. They started to pull their hair out.
Okay.
So yeah, when it was 2 weeks, it was great for everybody, but no one planned for the time that we had. Nobody was ready for 8 weeks.
Right. So I understand that work eventually got delivered via online platform to the students, especially those who were due to graduate. But why didn't that work?
Consistency and communication. So I don't think that whoever the powers that be are in my particular school system, I don't think they talk to teachers. I don't think they understood strategically how this was supposed to work for all students. Some students got packets. Some students were expected to work online. And so it just was all over the place. And so as a result, it was really frustrating for students who were supposed to graduate. They were expecting a big graduation, and they wanted to make sure their grades were up to par and that they learned the skills that they intended to learn before going to college. So it was kind of hectic. So it didn't work out because it wasn't well planned. It doesn't seem like it was very well thought out.
Wow. So I understand that there were some issues. Did all students have access to Wi-Fi? Was it offered at all to those who didn't have access? And how did that work with the Wi-Fi?
Well, what happened is there was a Wi-Fi company. I won't say the name of the company, but they supposedly partnered with the school system to provide internet service for students who didn't have Wi-Fi connections.
Okay.
And as soon as the parents realized that if they signed up for that particular service, that they were going to be bound to a contract for a year. And these are people who couldn't afford internet service in the first place. So now you're saying, oh, I'll give you free internet service during this COVID period. However, after that, you're bound to a contract to pay us. And so there goes the situation with using Wi-Fi, and it caused a digital divide. And so some students had access and some students didn't. Students in rural communities didn't have access either. So it just made it difficult. I noticed, however, there were some school systems, not mine, but others, who rolled out the buses and put hotspots on the buses.
Wow.
So the kids could use the devices they had at home and have internet access. And then in some districts, they actually gave communities hotspots for the students to use. But in my community, that is not what happened. And it was kind of disheartening for some of the students who didn't have access to Wi-Fi. And so those are the ones that got the packets. But like I said earlier, the packets were received well until the parents realized that, oh, this is not 2 weeks. This is going to go on for a long time. And so packets just wouldn't cut it. They needed some instruction for their kids.
Right. So what was the final outcome of the online classes?
What do you mean?
As far as how did it turn out? Now school is already out. So there was an 8-week period where education was supposed to be going on and things were kind of willy-nilly. So how did that eventually turn out for the students, especially those that were trying to graduate?
Well, they made sure that students graduated, but I don't think they graduated with the skills that they needed, because there is a curriculum, and the curriculum was not covered as a result of the COVID situation and the stay-at-home orders. So teachers were left to streamline their instruction. So students to this day are not prepared because they didn't get the full curriculum. They didn't get the full rigor that was promised to them at the beginning of the school year.
Okay. And what was your idea of how to bring a resolve to the dilemma of students being home and parents having to work from home?
Well, for me, I felt that I had to over communicate with these parents. I had to make sure that I reached out to them and that I was available all kinds of times an hour, which was kind of crazy for me. Like, oh, the phone's ringing and it's 10 o'clock. What's going on here? So I had to make myself available. I had to stretch beyond what I would normally do for these parents, because I felt for them. They were ill-equipped for this and they had no idea how to help their kids. And they needed to know that somebody cared and was going to help them through the process.
Right. So what were some of the major issues that you saw as resolvable when it came to communicating the learning process during the shutdown and continuing on with it from your standpoint, not the school system standpoint?
Well, from my standpoint, as an educator, I have always had a way to communicate with parents. So when we had this emergency situation, we had a system in place so that they can communicate with me. With the online learning, my students were already doing that. So I just had to do it full time opposed to doing it some of the time. But I had to make sure that I was available and I had to show empathy because this was unusual. And some of the excuses that you get during the school year and you say, I'm not buying that. Well, I had to buy some of the excuses this time.
Right.
Yeah.
That's understandable. We had to have to show grace. So tell me, after school is out, now school is out. A lot of people are insecure with the education that they got in the last part of school. How did you pivot and use this experience to launch a home-based business?
Well, I saw an opportunity and I seized upon it because there were too many people on the news and there were too many people in groups that I am a part of that talked about parents who just were at wit's end about trying to maintain a job and take care of their students. They didn't sign up to be teachers. So as a result, I saw an opportunity to throw up the parents a lifeline. I could show parents how to navigate the educational platforms that their teachers were using, their child's teachers were using. I was able to go in and help the students make a strategic plan so they can balance it. Because when you're doing online and the parent has a schedule and you have a schedule, there has to be some accountability. And the parents didn't have time for that. They needed a homework nanny. They needed somebody to come alongside them and help their child navigate the process and communicate with the teachers and make sure that the student was doing what they were supposed to do. And I gave them a little piece because school is already stressful. But when you have to be the teacher and you're trying to put bread on the table, it's just too much. It was just too much for the parents. So I saw an opportunity to give them some relief with their students.
Right. Thinking of that, what was the percentage of the parents that you encountered or at least heard about from other educators that had children at home with no help and no ability to complete their own work because the children were like a full-time job now?
That was the vast majority. In fact, I was a part of a community talk in reference to what went on during this pandemic time and the stay-at-home orders. And there were a lot of parents just distressed, especially parents with students who are not self-directed, students who have special needs, etc. And those parents didn't know how to use those platforms. They didn't know how to check to see if little Johnny was actually doing the work. And they didn't know how to help their child get the resources that they needed. So I would say the vast majority of parents, unless you're a teacher, even some of my teacher friends, they were freaking out because they're trying to work and they have small kids, especially the elementary age kids. They had a hard time with that and they needed somebody to help them. So you say, oh, well, Dr. Shaw, you talk to her about this and you follow through and make sure things are going right because I actually need to work.
Right. I'm curious, did you hear of anybody that actually lost their job because they weren't able to find childcare?
Well, I didn't hear of a lot of people losing their jobs because they couldn't find childcare. But what I did hear about is families having to get together and kind of network, despite of what was said about who could go around whom. Grandparents were having to kick in and take care of their grandkids because some of their kids were frontline workers. And so they had to go to work. So I am sure there were some that lost their job as a result. And then there were many who lost their mind as a result. Too much to do. It was very frustrating.
But you know what? The good part about that is that parents and the grandparents and the families came together. That's one thing that probably wasn't going on before all this started, and it has forced families actually to get together and work things out. So how did you solve the problem with parents that had older children at home, like they were in high school, and then the younger ones that may have been in middle school and even elementary school? So that's 3 different levels of education. How did you help these parents?
Well, with those parents, I had to create individualized plans for each age group and follow through and meet with the kids at different times to make sure that they were doing what they needed to do. And also a lot of times parents will depend on the older child to see that the younger child does what they need to do. But in this time when in some households there may have been one device, and so you have to have a schedule. This is the schedule for the older child and the schedule for the middle child and one for the younger, so that everybody had their time. And so if you had a plan in place and you work the plan and you monitor the plan, students were able to do better with that. So everybody's not overwhelmed because everybody couldn't be on the device at one time if you only had a couple or maybe one in the house.
Right, that makes sense. So I know you talk to some of the children. You have clients that have different ages of children. What were some of the issues that children expressed to you during this time of forced homeschooling?
Well, the smaller kids miss their classmates. They miss their classmates. So, you talk to parents about doing virtual play dates and things they didn't think about doing, getting all the kiddos together. The main thing that some of the older kids talked about is response time from their teachers.
Okay.
And when another adult gets involved, that response time gets a little quicker.
Okay.
So I found a way to make that happen so that the kids, especially those who are trying to graduate and they needed some feedback on a paper or something like that. So I would be able to communicate with the teachers for them.
Okay, that's excellent. Right now, are more parents still trying to ensure that their children are being educated, or are they fed up and letting their children play or even just watch television all day? In other words, do you see where some parents are still concerned even though school is officially out, or they're just saying, oh, this is over with, you go watch TV?
Well, I'm thinking that as a result of parents being overwhelmed, some of them just let the kids veg out on TV. However, the more astute parent understands that their child did not get what they needed during the school year. I think they understand that everything was abbreviated, because I heard parents say, oh, my child made better grades during the online time than they did during the school year.
Wow.
Yeah, they didn't get the full curriculum.
Right.
But yeah, I think that parents are realizing that their kids didn't get what they need, and they really are researching and trying to find ways to improve their child's skill level so that when they go back, they won't be behind in their reading and other things that they need to keep up with. Because the school system, as I know of, at least mine doesn't have a plan for filling in those gaps. And so it's going to be incumbent on the parent to fill in those gaps for their kids so that they can be on par and where they need to be at the appropriate grade level and competencies.
Right. So thinking of parents, how do you convince a parent to continue with the education throughout the summer so that their child will be able to compete when school continues?
Well, you have to share with the parent the advantage of having the edge. And the example I like giving is my son was a year-round swimmer. And when we started off, he swam just in the summer league. And I noticed when he raced against the kids who were in year-round swimming, it was like they were racing in two different races. And so I got caught on quickly and realized he needed a coach. And he needed to be coached year round, not just in the summertime.
Okay.
And so as a result, he was able to blow the other kids out of the water once I realized that, hey, I've got to put in this extra time and get him to a competitive level. And it's the same for our kids. We need to understand that they too need coaches. They too need to be able to fill in the gaps so that they'll be competitive and have an edge over other kids. We know about the star, I'm not going to call her name. She and her husband just recently got in trouble because they wanted to get their daughters in a certain college.
Okay.
And they didn't qualify. They didn't have the academics for it. They didn't participate in any sports. And so they had to pay someone to get them into the school illegally.
Right.
And so as a result, see, some people are going to jail as a result of it and paying fines. But they understood the importance of having a competitive edge, but they wanted to get into it the wrong way. However, I want to encourage parents to do it the right way and make sure that you don't count on the school system to teach your child everything you think they need to know. You've got to do some extra in order to have them competitive. And so they'll have an edge against the other students who are applying for college and other things, because we have a record of all-time high people applying to college. And so it's really getting competitive. So it would be best for these parents, especially now, to make sure that their students get that extra help that they need so that they can be above and beyond their peers.
Excellent. Thinking of competition, how do the schools in the United States pair up with schools around the country, around the world, being as though most of the other countries also shut down? But how do we stand up against other countries as far as education and in the competitiveness of the colleges, because there are children coming over from other countries to get into these schools?
Well, it's funny you'd ask that question. Now, listen, I have a few friends who work overseas, and we talk about this a lot. And the American curriculum is one of the best curriculums in the world. In fact, students in Dubai, if they want to go to a school with the American curriculum, they have to pay more money. Now, the caveat is we have a great curriculum. However, is it implemented here in the United States with fidelity? I wouldn't say that. I would say that certain students get rigor. Certain students are exposed to the full curriculum, and then others are not. And if parents are not aware of what students are supposed to be getting, they may not get it. Now, the British curriculum is good, but it's not better than what we have. In fact, the difference, you said that we're going to be competing for college. What happens is, under the British system, the kids go to school an extra year. So when our freshmen may be 18, but they'll be competing against 19 and 20-year-olds who have way more, I would say they were better prepared cognitively than our kids. And so they're more mature, and they're a more serious student. And even if you talk about culture, they are more serious than our kids. Our kids take a lot for granted here in the United States. So with those two things coupled, you would be wise as a parent to make sure that your child is getting the best education they can and honing their skills prior to going to college, because they're going to be competing against people who are much older than them.
Right. And I know when we were younger, the competition wasn't like that. But now that it is, you really, really, really need coaching, especially if the parent can't do it, and which most of them can't. Some of them are working 2 jobs already, even before the virus situation. So the coaching is really paramount. So as you know, my children attended Christian school and then homeschool, never attending the government school. However, these days, most everyone is at home right now. Do you think that the education of the child is better when the parent is actively involved?
For sure. And I'm not talking about helicopter moms being involved like that.
Now you gotta define helicopter moms for those who don't know what that is.
Okay.
I was one of those, but define it for us.
I don't think you were a helicopter mom, because they actually sometimes they'll try to do the child's work for them.
Oh gosh, yes.
And overbearing.
Mm-hmm.
So children have to learn to be independent, and we do have to teach them efficacy. We do. However, we need to do it with some constraints. We don't want to be really dogmatic towards the teachers and overbearing, and not allowing the child to breathe and learn and experience things. Otherwise, when they go to college, they won't be able to survive, because you can't ride your helicopter. You can't fly that helicopter in college, because they'll shut the door in your face, because they don't have to talk to parents anymore. So, and if your child gets used to that, they will expect you to bail them out all the time.
Yes. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Now, I've seen a sad situation I want you to address. My mother spent 30 years in the same school system that you're dealing with, and now she's a substitute teacher. One of the things that happens is that parents, and especially the young parents, do not participate at all. They do not come to the parent-teacher meetings. They don't help with the homework. They don't do anything. How do you get more parents to actually understand the importance of their child's education and get involved morally and academically?
Well, a lot of parents don't get involved with schools because maybe they had a bad experience when they were in school. And so they're transferring their feelings about school to their child's experience, which shouldn't be the same. You have to make parents feel welcome. So sometimes parents won't admit that they don't know certain things, or they don't know how to access certain things. So they have to be invited in. And when you invite them in, you show that there's a need for them. And as in that process, you can also show parents, like for example, with my situation, having to show parents how to navigate the educational platforms, so that they can check little Johnny's work and watch the progress and see when the work was posted and when it was graded and how it was graded and things of that nature, to make them aware. So if you bring in parents, make them feel welcome, and you empower the parents, then they're more apt to come. Like, come on in, let's do a science night, and bring your mom. And you'd be surprised on how many parents would love to do some of the things with technology and science that we have at our hands, at our fingertips now, that they've never been exposed to.
Right.
So you wow the parents, and then they'll want to participate. And I know parents work, so you need to make it at a time that's that when they're available. And sometimes it's not convenient for the educator, but sometimes you have to do it to get that buy-in from the parents.
Exactly. So how did you develop your programs to help the parents and the students develop a balance and harmony in the home? And how do you implement the programs that you put together, how do you implement those nationwide?
Well, in my program, I make sure that I tailor make the instruction for the parent situation and for the student situation. A lot of times, parents will get tutoring and academic coaching confused. They don't understand that that's like comparing apples to oranges, or comparing a personal chef to a chef at a 4-star, 5-star restaurant. It's different. So I would be that personal chef for that particular family. So I would meet with the parents and the child and come up with a strategic plan for that particular child's situation. And I have a unique tracking system that helps determine obstacles that stop students from achieving. And we work on those obstacles one at a time. Now, the beauty of this is I can implement this plan with a child in China or in Tennessee. It doesn't matter, because I use a virtual platform in order to do this. I keep open records for the parent, so that every meeting that I have with their child, I keep documentation so that the parent can see it in real time. So they get minutes from the meetings. With academic coaching, which is different from tutoring, not only do you get that one-on-one, you're going to get office hours, and you work on specific things with that particular child that will be far-reaching, and it'll cover whatever subject the student is engaged in. A lot of times, tutoring is generic.
Right.
It doesn't hone in into that specific child. So I'm able to do this through a virtual platform, and it's worked pretty well so far.
Good. Now, I'm one of those strategic thinkers and strategic planners. And although my children are grown, if I was a parent of a school-age child right now, I would be thinking about how to take advantage of the fact that we've had this pandemic situation. And I definitely would get coaching for my child. Do you see a particular demographic of people that are involved more so with getting the academic with their academic coaching with their children versus others? And don't you think that if more people understood the importance of getting their child coaching, they would do it? Because what I'm thinking is that academic coach with the education that they have, such as you have, will be able to find that child's bent. What is it that this child really excels in, and be able to work with that, where a parent is probably moving from place to place and can't see it. Do you see more of more people doing that now, that it's starting to come to light, or is it just something that people don't know about really much?
Well, some people really get confused again and think that these McDonaldized learning centers are places to take your kids and they can excel academically, and that's not what happens. You have to have something that's personalized. If you want your child to have a competitive edge in this world, then they need one-on-one coaching. They don't need to be a part of a group, even though there is group coaching.
Mm-hmm.
However, as a part of academic coaching, there's always the one-on-one, because you go through and strategically pinpoint the needs of that particular child, and you look at that particular family and their situation. So monetarily, it's so much worth it, because if your child is able to excel academically and they're in tune with their emotional intelligences, etc., then when it's time to apply to college, they're most likely going to get scholarships because they have excelled academically. And guess what? Colleges look for more than a GPA these days. They look for a well-rounded individual. And through coaching, you can pull out all those things in a kid. So I'm not working with them only to instill academics, but I'm working with them on values, on being reflective, and helping the family as a unit. So I'm actually coming and bringing peace and harmony into the household where there has been discontentment because of all the stress, because of all the requirements. So I come in and kind of ease it for everybody. So it's well worth it, especially if you expect your child to excel, then the coaching is well worth it.
Tell me about, you told me about, but tell everybody about you got a letter from a young lady, I believe it was a young lady, about when she entered college and was one of the only one that knew how to do, I think it was science labs, or fill out a lab thingy. Yeah.
Okay. It was a kid. It was a guy.
Okay.
And it was funny because I was sleeping. I got this text message in the middle of the night. And I'm like, what is going on? He was texting me this time of night. But anyway, I looked, and it was a long message thanking me because I made my students do these long lab reports, and I made them do conclusions and analyze data. And they didn't understand why I was making them go into this great detail. But they didn't realize that I had been in a meeting with some college professors and asked, what is it that you want kids who come through high school and come to your class to do science, chemistry, or whatever it is? What skills do you expect them to have? And they said, we would like them to be able to write. We would like them to be able to think critically and draw conclusions. And so I took that back and I took it to heart, and I implemented that in my classes. And lo and behold, this kid calls and he said he was the only one in his class that was able to do this lab report.
Wow.
Some of my clients, as it relates to the way that I keep track of my minutes and the transparency that I have with my parents with my coaching business, I had a student contact me and say that she was having a great time because I had already shown her how to use Google Classroom and how to use the Google Docs. And a lot of her peers were struggling to get that done. She's in a private school in another county. But yeah, she thanked me for that.
Right. So I appreciate the interview. Why don't you give us a way to contact you? I know you're going to send me something so that I can post it in the queue for everybody to see, but give us how to contact you for those who want to help their children go on through the summer and be ready. A lot of people don't feel like that last 8 weeks was profitable or productive for their children, and so they want to do something throughout the summer. So what's your what information would you give them for your contact?
All right, I'm going to give a lot of information. You can read some of the blog posts that I have and find out more about me at academiccoachingservices.com. You can email me at drshaw@academiccoachingservices.com or info at doctor, not info at doctor. I got doctor on the brain now.
Mm-hmm.
Info at academiccoachingservices.com.
Okay.
You want me to
post all of that anyway, but so appreciate it, and it was great, and I'm really hoping and praying that parents take this to heart and make sure that their children get an education, even if it's not in a college, because an education is going to keep them out of so much trouble, and as we see on the streets today, and that all can be avoided, even if your child is bent one way or the other with their skill set. They can always be successful if they get the right training and education and care. And I know that you give that. So thanks a lot for the interview.